Kevin Dougherty is running for retention on Pennsylvania's Supreme Court. Why do you believe you should remain on the bench?
Well, first and foremost, thanks for the invitation for permitting me to have an opportunity to address you and everyone who's watching the show. I think it's important that, look, I have been on this bench for 10 years. When you take into consideration the 10 years of jurisprudence that's available for anyone to access, you will determine how I view the cases that come before me. I'm a firm believer in following the dictate in the text of the Pennsylvania Constitution. I do not believe that our position is to legislate from the bench. It is and has always been to listen to the case, apply the law that's applicable to the facts that are presented before us. Prior to these 10 years on the bench, I served 15 years on the Court of Common Pleas in Philadelphia County. And prior to that, I had 12 years of trial experience, both as an assistant district attorney and as private counsel. So I'm an individual who literally has spent their entire legal career in a courtroom, advocating for and listening as a result of my positions. And I think that's essential at the highest point of a court system.
Before we go any farther, can you explain the concept of retention, or what is the task for voters come November?
Very interesting you say that. As I indicated, when I first became a common pleas court judge, as well as the Supreme, I had to raise my hand and take an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, as well as the Pennsylvania Constitution. Interestingly, the Pennsylvania Constitution specifically allocates the concept of a partisan election for judges. And we are to pick a partisan title. And as everyone knows, during the election, we are presented with the county of our origin, of our where we're from. Thereafter, the Constitution separates the re-election of a justice or judge. We stand for retention, which means the moment we put on that black robe, we had to hang up our partisan positions. That doesn't mean you forget your worldly experience and your life experiences and your courtroom experiences. So the concept is, for retention, it is for Pennsylvanians and Pennsylvanians only to judge whether the judges they elected are worthy of remaining in that position. We are standing in front of the electorate to say, look at our history, see what we've done, both on the court and what we've done to improve the court, and then make your decision whether it's a yes or no vote. I think if you were to look at the things that I've done, not only in my opinions or my decisions, but as to the issues of trying to expand autism in the court and being concerned about mental health in the court. And for my entire career, I've always been a champion of the child welfare program. And since the passing of our Chief Justice, Max Baer, I am the liaison to our Office of Children and Family in the Courts, which is specifically looking at statewide child welfare reform.
Justice Dougherty, just one more question about retention. Why have retention? You've explained the concept to us. Why not start from scratch and run against an opponent in a partisan election like you called it a minute ago?
Because the beauty of our Pennsylvania Constitution, as well as the federal Constitution, is the separation of powers. I truly believe a sacred condition of our Constitution is that distinct separation of powers in which the judiciary must remain separate and apart from the other two branches so that we can be fair. I have always indicated and stated, if you're in the executive branch, you represent the majority. The majority of the people who vote for you, you win. Same for our friends in the General Assembly. But in the judiciary, the opportunity is for us to be able to traverse the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania so that we get to see the counties and the way of life, which will only broaden our understanding of how the Commonwealth operates so that when we get a case, we can put our mindset there. For example, I'm born and raised in Philadelphia County, but my experiences in Cambria County and Erie and Jefferson County, by being there and meeting with the people, will help me in my decisions when a case comes before me and they make reference to an area that I've been to. The difference is we're not partisan. We're not here. We're not here to win the favor of the voter. We're here to apply the law to the facts of the case before us.
Justice, help us get a better understanding of PA Supreme Court here in Pennsylvania. In other words, how does it figure into our court system?
Well, it's interesting you say that. First and foremost, we're proud to say that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court is the oldest appellate court in the Northern Hemisphere. Our court began in 1684. At that time, it was called the Provincial Appellate Court. William Penn created it in his initial founding of Pennsylvania. At that time, Charles II of England would have appointed those justices to that court. It wasn't until 1722 that the Judiciary Act created the current Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Our court is actually older than the United States Supreme Court. And what's really interesting is our Constitution, which was written before the United States Constitution, provides Pennsylvanians with more rights than does the United States. We have a right to a clean environment. We have an actual right to free, fair elections, and we have an equal amendments right. Unlike what happened in the federal government tried to pass an equal amendments right, Pennsylvania has one embodied in it. Coupled by one of our major fundamental rights is that we have a right to reputation. You don't have a right to say things and destroy someone's reputation. People, think of it this way. People spend their entire career, 20 years building a reputation, and one scandalous fabrication can take it away. We have recourse for that.
What kinds of cases are heard in PA Supreme Court?
The Pennsylvania Supreme Court, as being at the top of the judiciary in Pennsylvania, we have the opportunity, what we call discretionary review. There are 7 justices. Each justice is elected through a partisan election, and then, as you know, retained thereafter. Of the 7 justices, we receive, let's say, approximately 21 to 2,300 requests called allocators, requests for our court to listen to their case. Now, that means that between the 7 of us, we each have to take about 300 of those requests, and we have to review them with a clerk, and we have to decide by reading the voluminous volume of that, the voluminous paperwork. We have to decide whether the legal issue is discrete enough that it's going to have an impact not only on that person, but whether the legal ramification is going to affect 13 million Pennsylvanians. We have to decide, and then we have to pass a correspondence around to our colleagues as to whether we should accept it or reject it. And we need 2 other colleagues to join us. There are many times that I may say, I recommend, and one of my colleagues will file a reconsideration indicating no, or vice versa. So while we're preparing those 700 or those 300 from the 7, we're each reviewing each other's 300. So that's quite an amount of work that we're doing on a daily basis, coupled by the fact that we are preparing for the cases that are to be heard. Where we will be in Pittsburgh, I believe it's October 7th through the 9th. So I'm preparing those cases as we speak, and while I have to stand for retention. And then we're also crafting the opinions of those cases that we did hear, that we've been assigned, and we have to review them to determine whether I'm going to join them, whether I'm going to write what's called a concurrent opinion, meaning I join them, but maybe for a different reason, or whether I disagree with them and I will write a dissenting statement. The beauty of, well, that's what we have to do on a daily basis. We have, and I should say, of the amount of cases that are requested, we're only accepting about maybe anywhere from 5 to 8%. But for those capital cases, and those cases in which the General Assembly specifically requires our court to hear, for example, gambling type cases, they're mandatory cases that we will hear.
Justice, can you give us an example of a case that had especially strong significance or importance for the public, something that was in the news?
Well, we've had several cases that I'm sure you're aware of. You know, it's unfortunate reality that when our Commonwealth's legislator and executive branches succeed only in creating a void, that we have no choice but to step in to fill that breach based upon our constitutional duties. And it's obvious that the election cases are most noted. And interestingly, despite the partisan attacks. I believe 10 years of our jurisprudence indicates that I don't think one justice carries a partisan view of any of the seven of us. But that would be a large case. I know we dealt with we had to make the decision that school funding had to be revisited, but they're big cases. But here's the interesting part. The cases that really have an impact are dealing with everyday issues like child custody, or whether government is entering a family's home unnecessarily through our dependency process. I've often said to people, I come out of the family court arena. The difference between custody and dependency is custody is a private dispute between two adults as to what's best for the child. Dependency, that's having government come through your door and impose its will on your children to possibly up to 18. That's a frightening thought. Government is not a good parent. So you need good judges to make sure that there's a right way and a wrong way to do those things. To me, they're more important. They're
Now,
not as sexy, but they impact 13 million Pennsylvanians.
you were elected to Supreme Court in 2015, and I'd like to reflect on some of your accomplishments over the past 10 years. And I understand you led a program that accommodates people with autism. Just what kind of support can the court give?
Well, listen, I have learned a long time ago that one doesn't have to operate with great malice to do great harm. The absence of empathy and understanding is sufficient. And I'd have to give you a quick anecdotal war story for you to truly understand this. But when I was a trial judge in the Philadelphia Family Court, I had a juvenile that's standing before me. I had just convicted this child of a felony. The child was standing in front of me, and it's different in juvenile court. I have to determine whether vision from the court. In my quest to make that decision, I was speaking with the child, and he would not look at me. He turned his back on me. He was fiddling with his hands, and I said, "Son, look at me. Your life is on issue. I can make you a convicted felon the rest of your life. Our prisons are so overcrowded. We're going to give you a prior record score to get in. At 14 years old, you're looking at state prison as opposed to state college." It was then that the severity hit the mom, who was actually, I believe, a foster mom, who brought me to the side and said her child was on the spectrum. I have to be honest with you. It hit me like a brick. I didn't understand what the spectrum was. I hadn't been exposed to autism. So I thought, I showed ignorance, but I'm only going to show ignorance once, because the one who hides it shows it often. So I self-educated, which went to judicial reform. And I was able to do that as the head of the Philadelphia Family Court. Well, 2015, my colleagues permitted me to take that show on the road through the Commonwealth. And again, it's all about good governance. It's people have elected us to try to be just. People who are neurodiverse, they don't have a normal, or they don't have the same understanding of our facts. And we have since then, we have created a stakeholders meeting where during the pandemic, I did a listening tour throughout the Commonwealth. And as a result, we were able to create tool bags for each county to effectuate its own implementation of judicial reform, so that our court system is more available and understanding to those who need it but do not understand it. And I have to tell you, I believe we're up to 15 counties have sensory rooms in their courthouse. Most courts, if not all courts, have a sensory bag. And I'm proud to say this has even affected, there's a wonderful district attorney in Westmoreland County who has opened her own sensory room in the district attorney's office. And we've been able to educate over 2,500 people, judges, lawyers, the police officers, state. It's a wonderful program, because should we not be just? I would sit back and think, my God, did I ever remove a child from a parent during my child welfare days? Because maybe mom didn't finish the family service plan when she was incapable? Or did we ever convict someone because they weren't able to communicate, or the witness wasn't able to communicate? We need some source of empathy and understanding so that we can have true justice. And so I went on a tour of education. We developed an environmental analysis and roadmap for counties. That has now bled over into mental health. And in October that just passed, I'm proud to say that the court system initiated the first mental health summit with regards
Hmm.
to helping those who are entering the judicial system that have mental health and trying to divide those who don't need to be in the prison system as opposed to a secure, maybe mental health facility.
Hmm.
And we have been working hand in glove with the governor's office as well as the General Assembly. And to me, that is when the three branches of government work together, there is no void. There's only
Mhm.
success. And we're in the I would say the infancy stage of creating that. But that this is what's happening. And these are all the reasons that I'm hoping to be retained so that we can continue improving what we promised the voters 10 years ago we would do.
Let's keep in mind the story you just shared with us a few minutes ago about the boy in your courtroom that had autism. So specifically, just how have justices been trained to work with people with autism? Try to tell us briefly.
Well, we've brought in experts. We've worked with the Department of Autism, with our Department of Health and Human Services. We've worked with Drexel University. They have a specific program called ASSERT. We have brought in experts and professionals to teach us so that we are
Hmm.
able to go out and teach the public. We've held educational courses, continuing legal education and continuing judicial education so that we can create the system players. We've also made this readily available to the various police stations and municipalities. So this has had a tsunami-like effect across the Commonwealth.
Hmm.
And for
Let's.
the first time, we're able to track. There was a time when I asked how many children in child welfare had
Mhm.
autism, and we didn't know that. We were able to tell you how many couldn't speak English or how many needed, maybe assistance, but we couldn't tell you how many had neurodiversities.
Hmm.
And this was affecting our programs.
Justice, let's find out more about your work experience, and let's start with the position you held a number of years ago, probably at the beginning of your legal career, and that would be Assistant District Attorney in Philadelphia. Was that your first legal job? And uh, reflect on how that job went for you.
Listen, anyone who's ever had the beauty of being accepted into a district attorney's office or a public defender's office knows that and we would have all stayed there except you're not going to get paid well because
Hmm.
it's a government job. And but the reality is there's such camaraderie, but and friendship. Some of my lifelong friends have come out of my experience at the Philadelphia DA's office. But here's what really impressed me. I understood the authority and the power of government. As I shared with you, I'm concerned as a judge about government coming through your door. Well, as an assistant DA, we were the Commonwealth. I used to tell everyone we were the people that wore the white hat. And
Hmm.
we would go in and we would help our community. And I truly believe it. But we're also able to balance it because our jobs as prosecutors are to prosecute, not persecute. That really built in me something that had a profound impact on my personality, such that
Hmm.
when I went to the judicial side, I realized that now there can be restraints upon government, yet there's also things government can do when it works
Hmm.
together that really benefit people.
Justice,
So
let's.
it really helped cultivate my judicial demeanor, I would say.
Well, speaking of judicial demeanor, let's consider when you got on the Court of Common Pleas in Philadelphia. That was back in 2001. That was a while ago, and I wonder what lessons you learned there that you can apply to your current position as a justice in the Supreme Court.
As a look, it was not a smooth transition going from an advocate at being only one side of the bench to being a judge. But I did learn that the word listen contains the same letters as the word silent.
Mhm.
So I learned to talk less and listen more. And I think that is probably the best lesson that I learned. And you also are able to see the beauty, I think, of being a justice from my experience as a trial lawyer and trial judge is I understand the true implications of our decisions. Sometimes what we decide could be beautiful in theory, and it could be discussed in academic circles, and scholars can write about it. But when you wanted to put it into practice, it could hand
Mhm.
tie attorneys and or have detrimental effects to the litigants. And I think that's the difference and the luxury of me being a trial lawyer, trial judge, now on the appellate court.
You said
if
it's
that makes sense to you.
you said it's important to listen when you're a judge or a justice for that matter. So let's extend that conversation and consider what are the other good qualities or traits or characteristics of a good judge? Tell us.
Someone true, I believe judges need to be well-rounded. Um, you need the beauty of, well, let me start it this way. The beauty of being a judge is that you have an opportunity to, if you're a local judge in your county, you have to travel the entire county. I had to travel the state. Here's the concern that I have. We know that judicial elections are always the lowest turnout election anytime. And it's because judges are not sexy. We're not political. You only get to see us once every 10 years or 6 years if you're in a less in one of the small lower courts. But when you elect a judge, you're putting a pen in this person's hand. And with that pen, they could take your child, they could take your income, they could take your house. And in a homicide case, they could take your life. But most people don't know who judges are. And until it's too late, that's when they're standing in front of one.
Hmm.
And if that judge makes a mistake, the beauty of our system is that there's an appellate process. And I think it's fundamental and significant that our Supreme Court has judges or justices who were actual lawyers and trial judges, such that we understand. And that when we read those briefs, we see we're gifted. When I was a trial judge, I had to make an impromptu decision right there based upon the facts with no assistance. On the Supreme Court, in the appellate court, the case is over. You know what the decision is. It's almost like hindsight is 2020. Well, I got the hindsight and I'm reading the briefs. I think that's the difference and the beauty of it. But I also believe you have to bring the qualities and all the lessons learned through your judicial history to come to the right conclusion.
Let's talk about the PA Bar Association's system of ratings, and they do that for the candidates in judicial elections. And you earned a record or a rating of recommended. And just tell us briefly, what kind of process did they put you through?
Well, there is quite a lengthy questionnaire that we had to fill out 10 years ago. I think this is probably the fourth questionnaire, considering my history on the bench. And right now, the recommended, it's either you're not recommended or you are recommended. So it's actually the highest recommendation. And they did it. Yeah, I got that recommendation. The upside and the beauty of that is, despite any tension that may be out there in the public, this is a bipartisan recommendation by lawyers looking not, they look at my temperament, my personality, my conduct on the bench, and look what we've done while we're on the bench and reviewed our opinions. And they've also made numerous phone calls to practitioners who have stood cases in front of us to determine how did we treat them? Did we know the issues before we presented the case? And they came out and they said they recommend it. I'm also very proud to say that I also had the recommendation of every major law enforcement agency in Pennsylvania. And I've gotten those who are concerned about women's rights and all the other groups. So I'm a lucky man.
Justices Christine Donoghue and David Wecht are also seeking retention, and they are also Democrats. Do you run together as a unit? How are you handling awareness for your retention in November?
Yes. Anytime we could get together, we will campaign together because we're standing as three standing for retention. And we each individually have to try to cover each other across the Commonwealth.
And talk about the political balance on the court as it stands currently, and it's possible that it could change after the retention outcome is made public.
Very much so. And it's so interesting. It's very interesting that everybody but our court refers to us as a 5-2 Democrat over Republican court. We refer to us as fellow justices. And the two Republican justices, Kevin Brobson and Sally Mundy, are very close friends of ours, or of mine. And it's interesting because they want to make it sound as if there's some contention, but I can't tell you how many times I'm sitting, and I usually sit next to Justice Mundy because she came shortly after I did. How many times I lean over to her and ask her opinion, or we have conversations. And and Browson because he comes with a wealth of knowledge from Commonwealth Court, which I didn't have that or the executive branch. That's the purpose of the judiciary, is to remove that presence.
A few minutes ago, Justice Dougherty, you made the point that the public, for the most part, is not that aware of judicial elections. But let's consider a report from WHYY. They said this campaign is unusually aggressive for a race like this. In other words, Republicans want you out.
Well, let's put it this way. My understanding is more people from outside Pennsylvania don't want us. And that I understand that they're raising millions and millions of dollars. But you know what? This is about, what people need to know is I was appointed as a common pleas court judge, quote unquote, as a Democrat by a Republican governor, Tom Ridge. I ran in Philadelphia with the endorsement of both the Democrat and the Republican Party, and I won both. And I was successful in the 2015 race with a lot of quote unquote Republican support. So I like to view this as a nonpartisan race. I welcome support from everywhere. But what I do say to those who are outside, that I'd rather, coming from the good book, better is a poor man who walks in his integrity than a rich man who's crooked in his ways, if anybody knows Proverbs. So I have to believe that Pennsylvanians will understand what we stand for and that what I represent as well, and they will retain us. They will vote yes.
We only have about a minute left in our interview. Use that time, please, and tell our viewers why they should retain you in November.
Hey, like I tell everybody, I'm a lawyer that was really lucky. I came from an area in Philadelphia where we had no lawyers or doctors. I became a lawyer because I saw the worst that could happen to your family and friends and neighbors without understanding legal representation. I have spent my entire career in public service. It is an absolute honor and a privilege to do what I've done, and hopefully I have an opportunity to continue doing this alongside making sure that Pennsylvania remains a democratic establishment where people have a right to work, can work in safe conditions, have a right to choose how they wish to live their lives without government interference. And a long time ago, I read a book written by former Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill. In the book, he indicated that he wanted to know why his next door neighbor, lifetime family friend, Mrs. O'Brien, didn't vote for him. And her response was, because you didn't ask me, Tip. So I'd like to take this opportunity. Being a lifelong Pennsylvanian, I take nothing for granted. So I would ask each and every one of you, sir, and everybody who's looking at me through this program, I'd say, my name's Kevin Dougherty. I am standing for retention on November 4th. I am standing along with David Weck, Christine Donahue, Alice DeBow, and Michael Wojak. But I am looking at you and I'm saying, on November 4th, would you please vote for me? Thank you.
Kevin Dougherty is running for retention on Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, sir. Despite the hiccups, I truly appreciated it.